It was a Saturday morning, the kind where the world moves just a little slower. The kind I used to look forward to, where we'd wake up without alarms, make pancakes together, and argue half-jokingly over which coffee mug belonged to who. She liked the one with the faded blue flowers. I always reached for the chipped black one I'd gotten back in college. But lately, the rhythm of those mornings had changed. She was quieter, smiled less. Her phone spent more time face down. I chalked it up to stress. Her job at the firm had been intense lately. Late nights, last-minute meetings, conference calls from the car. That's what she told me, and I wanted to believe her. God, I did. That morning, I was standing by the front door, keys already in hand, waiting to leave for the hardware store. We were out of furnace filters, and the garage door had started making that angry metal noise again. She was in the bedroom, still finishing her makeup. Said she'd meet me out front in a minute, and to bring gum if we had any. That's what started it. Gum. Her purse was sitting on the little bench by the door. Normally, I wouldn't go in it. Wasn't my place. Even after 8 years of marriage, we had our unspoken boundaries, and digging through her things was one of them. But it was just gum. Just one stick. She always had some in that little inside zip pocket, the one where she kept spare hair ties, receipts, and lip balm. I reached in, felt around, and my fingers brushed against a small folded square of thermal paper. The kind you get from parking meters, gas stations, and restaurants. I probably would have ignored it, but something about the texture caught me, soft from being handled, but thick, like it had been folded and refolded. I pulled it out, planning to toss it in the trash for her. Then I saw the name at the top. Arlington Hotel. Downtown. Dated 2 nights ago. I stood there, holding it, the cold from the doorknob pressing into my palm like it was reminding me I was still standing. The print was faded but legible. One dinner at the restaurant on the first floor, drinks from the bar, and a single night in room 716. The total was steep, more than I'd expect from a solo stay. A line item even read, 2 guests, late checkout. The timestamp said she'd checked in around 7:43 p.m. on Thursday. That same night, she told me not to wait up. Some new client in town needed after-hours attention. Said she'd probably get home around midnight, maybe later. I remember she came in just after 1 in the morning. I was already in bed, half asleep. She kissed my forehead, said she was exhausted, and didn't even change out of her work blouse before curling up on the edge of the mattress. I didn't think much of it at the time, but holding that receipt now, the edges warm from my fingertips, the whole memory cracked open like a brittle eggshell. She lied. My heart didn't race. It didn't even sink. It just paused, like someone hit mute on the world. I looked down at the receipt, then back toward the hallway, half expecting her to walk out and catch me red-handed. But all I heard was the soft drone of her hairdryer through the closed bathroom door. Normal sounds. Familiar. But now they felt wrong, like hearing your own voice on tape for the first time and not recognizing it. For a moment, I thought about confronting her, marching into the bathroom and holding it up like a badge. What is this? But I didn't. I don't know why. Maybe I wasn't ready to hear the lies she'd used to cover the first one. Or maybe I just didn't want to watch her try. Maybe a part of me hoped, stupidly, that there was an explanation I just couldn't see yet. So I folded it back up, exactly the way I found it. Same creases. Same corners. Slid it into the inside pocket. Zipped the purse shut like nothing had happened. And then I found the gum. Spearmint. Took a piece, popped it into my mouth, and walked out to the car. Sat there staring at the windshield, chewing slowly, thinking about furnace filters and whether the garage door could hold off another week. She joined me a minute later, smiling like everything was still the way it used to be. I smiled back and said nothing. A full week passed. I didn't bring it up, not the receipt, not the hotel, not the odd silence I'd been living in since. I went to work, fixed the leaky faucet in the laundry room, took the trash out on Wednesdays, like always. I kissed her good morning, and I kissed her good night. But something had shifted behind my ribs, and I could feel it every time she walked into the room. Thursday rolled around. She was dressed sharper than usual, heels I hadn't seen in a while, the burgundy blouse with the little gold buttons she usually saved for client meetings. Her hair curled in soft waves, makeup just a little more defined than it had been all week. I noticed all of it, quietly, while I was fixing a dent in the truck bumper in the driveway. She came out with her travel mug and kissed me on the cheek. I might be late again tonight, she said, unlocking her car. Client dinner. Could run long. I nodded, smiled. No problem. Be safe. She pulled out of the driveway, tires crunching over the gravel patch by the mailbox. I counted to 500 in my head, then grabbed my keys. She didn't notice me trailing her. I stayed 3 cars back, turning when she turned, slowing when she did. Traffic helped. Lots of folks heading downtown after work. I didn't even need to drive like a spy or anything. Just another commuter with nowhere urgent to be. She didn't go to her office. She exited off the main strip and headed into the city, past the usual grid of high-rises and parking garages. My hands tightened around the steering wheel when I saw her signal toward the Arlington Hotel's side entrance, the same place listed on that folded receipt still sitting in her purse. She pulled into the underground lot. I passed it and circled around, found street parking a block over and waited, engine off, fingers tapping on my thigh. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe that she'd walk out with a group of colleagues, all dressed up for a fancy dinner. Maybe she'd prove me wrong, and this would all end with me feeling guilty and foolish. But it didn't go that way. 10 minutes later, I saw her exit the elevator at the side of the building. She stood by the entrance, phone in hand, checking her screen. Then he arrived. Tall, navy blazer. One of those guys with confidence you can see from a block away. The kind of man who's used to people watching him, and probably expects it. He walked right up to her, no hesitation, and she smiled in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. That kind of easy, familiar smile people reserve for someone who already knows their story. Then they hugged. Not the kind of hug you give a coworker. Not the polite one-arm thing people do at office parties. This one was slow, long, his hand on the small of her back, her chin resting against his shoulder. A kind of stillness that said, this wasn't the first time. I stayed in the car, engine off, heart thudding against the silence like a flat tire flapping down an empty road. They went in together. Not rushed, not looking around. Just walked through the glass doors like they'd done it a dozen times before. Maybe more. I sat there, watching, feeling my stomach twist into knots I didn't know I had. An hour passed. I didn't move. I stared at the 7th floor windows, trying to guess which room they'd gone to. Then, right around 6:15, one of the lights flicked on. Room 716. Same as the receipt. I watched that light for another 40 minutes. It didn't go off. It just stayed there, glowing like a beacon I couldn't ignore. Like someone upstairs had taken the truth and left it lit on purpose, just in case I was still stupid enough to doubt it. A couple walked by my truck, laughing, holding hands. Their joy felt foreign, like watching a language I didn't speak anymore. It got darker. The city lights came on. Still, that one window glowed. No shadows moved. No sign of life, just light and silence. I didn't need to see any more. I'd already seen enough. But I stayed a while longer. Not sure why. Maybe I was hoping for something to make it all make sense. Maybe I was giving myself time to adjust to the shape of this new reality. Eventually, I turned the key in the ignition, drove home slow, parked in our usual spot, sat in the dark for 10 more minutes before going inside. She didn't come home that night until just past midnight. I was in bed, lights off, pretending to be asleep. She whispered something soft as she slipped under the covers. But I didn't answer, because now I knew. I started with the bank. That felt like the right place. Cold, clean, simple. Numbers and forms. No emotion. Just transactions. It was a Tuesday morning, 2 days after I watched her disappear behind the hotel doors. I walked into the branch I usually avoided, the one across town near the outlet mall where we never shopped. That way I wouldn't run into anyone who knew her, or us, or anything about the life I was preparing to leave behind. I asked the woman at the desk to help me open a personal checking account. Nothing fancy. Just somewhere to park my own money, with my name only. I picked a new password I hadn't used before, one she wouldn't guess, and made sure there were no alerts, no paper statements, nothing that would show up at the house. She offered to link it to our joint savings for convenience. I smiled and said no thanks. After that, I started funneling over small bits of cash, nothing too obvious. Round numbers would raise questions, and I didn't want to be careless. So I made it messy on purpose. $50 here. 87 there. 122 on a Friday afternoon. Just enough to not look like much, just enough to build a foundation for wherever I'd end up. That same week, I pulled into a quiet neighborhood a few towns over. There was a small 2-story brick building that looked like it used to be something else, maybe a dentist's office once. Now it was chopped into little apartments with month-to-month leases and a shared laundry room that smelled faintly of bleach and cigarettes. I met the landlord, an older guy named Phil, who wore overalls and talked slow. He walked me through a studio on the 2nd floor. The windows rattled when trucks passed, and the carpet had that thin, crunchy feel like it hadn't been replaced in years. But it had a working stove, a clean shower, and locks that turned. That was all I needed. I paid the deposit in cash. Told him I'd be moving things in little by little. No help. The next thing was work. I'd been there nearly 8 years. Not the kind of job that made people jealous, but solid enough, benefits, paid time off, a parking spot with my name on it. I sat at my desk that Monday, typed up a letter that said I was resigning for personal reasons, and handed it straight to the manager. He looked surprised, didn't ask too many questions. I was grateful for that. I didn't want to lie, but I didn't want to tell the truth either. After work, I drove straight to a small law office on Maple Avenue. The sign out front was old and sun-faded. Dixon and Carr, family law since 1973. The waiting room smelled like carpet cleaner and printer toner. The woman at the desk offered coffee. I declined. When I met with the lawyer, I gave him the facts in order, like I was reading off a grocery list. Married 10 years. No kids. Joint mortgage. One shared credit card. I told him I wasn't interested in dragging things out. I just wanted to be gone and clean. He nodded and said he'd start the paperwork. By that point, everything had a quiet rhythm. I'd finish work, make some excuse to be out late, and drive over to the studio to move in a few things at a time. A box of clothes. A set of sheets. My tools. I didn't want to make one big trip and tip her off. I wanted the transition to be invisible, like a shadow slipping off a wall at sunset. Packing up the house was harder than I thought it'd be. Not emotionally, at least not in the way I expected. It was just slow. Tedious. Every drawer I opened had pieces of a life I was about to abandon. Socks folded next to hers. Mugs we bought in Colorado. A photo strip from a county fair, our faces younger and closer than they felt now. I took only what was mine, or what I'd need. Left the rest untouched. No messy boxes by the door. No empty hangers. Nothing out of place that she'd noticed too soon. I wanted her to walk into the house and feel like I had just stepped out to grab the mail. When I was done, I walked into the kitchen one last time. Stood there a moment, looking around. The hum of the fridge. The way the sunlight hit the tile. Familiar. Ordinary. I opened the silverware drawer. That's where I left it. My wedding ring. Sitting in the little plastic divider next to the spoons. Quiet. Final. No note. No message. Just the thing itself. Heavy with meaning, yet nothing at all. I closed the drawer. Walked out the front door. Locked it behind me. And I didn't look back. The day I vanished was a Wednesday. Midweek, middle of the month, nothing special about it. The weather was mild, one of those overcast afternoons where the sun never quite makes up its mind. The kind of day that just slides past most people without leaving a mark. But I remember every detail. She had left for work in a rush, as usual. Coffee in one hand, phone in the other, calling someone before she even hit the driveway. I watched her from the front window, behind the curtain, like a man watching the last act of a play he no longer believes in. When her car disappeared down the street, I stepped into motion like a clock spring unwinding. I had a checklist, and I moved through it without a word. Load the last bag from the garage. Lock the basement door. Double-check the envelope with the lawyer's contact info. Unplug the Wi-Fi router, just in case she tried to track me through any devices we'd forgotten to disconnect. I turned off my phone an hour earlier. Not just powered it down, but removed the SIM, pulled the battery, tossed it all into a donation box at a thrift store 10 miles away. That phone knew too much. I needed to vanish, not just physically, but digitally. I logged out of every account, deleted every app, wiped everything that could ping or track or trace. Then I sat down at the kitchen table for the last time, alone. Same table where we'd once done crossword puzzles over Sunday coffee, where we had laughed until our sides hurt over burnt pancakes and inside jokes that don't even make sense to me now. I sat there for 10 minutes, not moving, just listening to the silence. It wasn't the silence of absence. It was the kind of silence that fills a place after someone stopped pretending. Then I stood, grabbed the last set of keys off the hook, and walked out the front door like I was heading to the mailbox. Except I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I got into the truck, pulled out onto the street, and drove. There was no big moment. No dramatic pause. Just tires on pavement, a left turn at the intersection, and then nothing familiar in the rearview mirror. I drove straight to the studio apartment, parked, and sat there for a long time with the engine off. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat, hands on the wheel, watching a bird hop along the fence across the lot. Then I went inside, shut the door, and let it all go. That night, she came home to nothing. No truck in the driveway. No lights on. No shoes by the door. No jacket on the hook. It probably took her a second to notice. Maybe she called out my name. Maybe she thought I was in the backyard, or upstairs, or grabbing something from the store. But the deeper she looked, the clearer it became. The closet was half empty. My side of the bed untouched. Drawers that used to hold my t-shirts now held air. And in the kitchen, nestled in the drawer beside the butter knives and mismatched forks, sat the ring she gave me. A circle of gold, still and silent. Her first instinct was to call, I'm sure. But my number went straight to nowhere. Not even voicemail. Just a cold disconnection. When she pulled up my social media, she found blank pages. Deleted accounts. No trace of where I'd gone. Messages bounced. Posts vanished. It was like I'd been erased with one long, steady wipe. She must have panicked then. She called my brother. I knew she would. He told me ahead of time, asked what I wanted him to say. I told him the truth, enough of it, anyway. Tell her I'm fine, I said. And tell her that's all she needs to know. So when she asked, probably with that rehearsed panic in her voice, the kind people use when they know they should be upset, he said just that. He's fine. That's all you need to know. And he hung up. After that, I became a ghost. Not in the spooky way, but in the kind of way where your name stops echoing in the places it used to belong. I disappeared from the grocery list. From the toothbrush holder. From the warm indent on the left side of the bed. From the routines and rituals that used to stitch our days together. She came home to an empty house, and the house kept going without me. Like I'd never existed. And that's how I wanted it. Not out of cruelty. Not even out of anger. But because sometimes, the only way to reclaim your life is to stop explaining why it got stolen in the first place. Sometimes, you don't know the person who broke your heart a front row seat to your healing. So I disappeared. And in doing so, I finally began to exist again. It was 10 days after I walked away when the papers landed on her doorstep. My lawyer arranged the courier. I gave him the address, told him to send it in a plain manila envelope, no note, no extras. Just the documents. Neat. Formal. Final. He sent me a message the morning it was delivered, confirmed, papers received, signature on file. That was it. Short and to the point. I appreciated that. Nothing flowery, nothing dramatic. The work was done. I pictured the moment, her opening the front door, probably with her car keys in one hand, coffee in the other, expecting a package from one of those online stores she liked. Instead, a man in a brown jacket and cap standing on the porch, holding out an envelope with her name on it. Asking for a signature. Nothing more. Inside, divorce papers. Already signed. My name printed in black ink, steady on every dotted line. No scribbles, no footnotes, no chance to talk it out. Just facts and endings and legal separation broken into paragraphs and subpoints. I imagined her standing in the entryway, flipping through the pages. Silence around her. Maybe a little panic rising in her chest. Maybe not. I'll never know. What I do know is that after that, the noise started. She posted online first. I didn't see it. I was gone from all those places, but someone told me. Said she shared a photo of us at a cabin up north, smiling under pine trees, back when we still made time for things like that. The caption read something like, "Has anyone heard from him? I just want to talk." It didn't stop there. She posted again 2 days later. Then again. Every message vague enough to seem casual, but desperate around the edges. She turned the comments off when people started asking what happened. She reached out to people we both knew. Old coworkers, friends she barely kept in touch with. Even emailed my old job. That one made me laugh, softly, bitterly. I hadn't worked there in weeks. But she tried, said it was urgent, said she was worried. Someone at the office forwarded it to me. Didn't include a comment. Just hit forward and left the message untouched, like a dead leaf placed on my doorstep. And still, I didn't respond. It wasn't that I enjoyed ignoring her. It wasn't satisfaction or revenge. It was just that I was done. I'd said everything I needed to say when I disappeared. My silence wasn't a tactic, it was the only honest thing left between us. She had made her choices in silence. In dark rooms and half-truths. In long glances and missing hours. She had bet that I'd never find out, or worse, that even if I did, I'd forgive and move on. She didn't expect that silence could cut both ways. She never understood the depth of the quiet I had been living in. The kind that didn't come from words left unsaid, but from being treated like a background character in your own life. Ignored in plain sight. Shrinking, little by little, until the person in the mirror felt like someone you owed an apology to. Let her call out into the void now. Let her ask strangers for clues. Let her wonder when it all started slipping through her fingers. Was it the dinner she skipped? The last time she came home late? The day she stopped asking about my work? She could turn those questions over for years and still miss the point. Because none of this happened overnight. You don't go from building a life together to dropping off paperwork by courier in 10 days. That fall happens slow. It happens in chipped mugs, unanswered texts, kisses that land like habits. In receipts folded into the corners of purses, left to be found by hands that weren't supposed to go digging. She didn't notice the erosion. She only noticed the cliff when she stepped off it. And by then, I was already gone. So let her hold the envelope. Let her sit at that same kitchen table, reading each clause, seeing my signature. Let her feel the weight of a decision I made with full clarity and calm hands. She got the documents. And that was all I had left to give. I never told anyone to cut her off. That's the thing. Not once. I never picked up the phone and said, if she calls, don't answer. I didn't need to. The people who know me best, my family, my friends, they saw what this did to me. They saw how I changed. And when I walked away, they didn't ask for a script. They just followed my silence with their own. She messaged my best friend first. His name's Danny. We've known each other since Little League. Played shortstop and third base together, shared a locker freshman year, stood up in each other's weddings. He was the first person I told, back when I found the receipt. He didn't say much then, just listened. His hands were clenched the whole time, jaw tight like he was holding back something big. When I finished talking, he nodded once and said, whatever you decide, I've got your back. So when she sent him a message, something long, dramatic, full of worry and half confessions, he didn't reply. Didn't even read it, far as I know. He told me later he just archived it and kept on mowing the lawn. That's Danny for you. No speeches. Just loyalty, plain and solid as oak. Then she called my mom. That one I didn't expect. Or maybe I did, but I hoped she wouldn't go there. My mom is kind. One of those people who sends handwritten cards for birthdays and bakes banana bread for neighbors who just moved in. She loved my wife like a daughter. Treated her that way from day one. But when the call came in and the name popped up on her screen, she didn't answer. Let it ring. Then blocked the number. She told me later she didn't even hesitate. I saw her name, she said, and I felt cold. Like she'd reached through the phone and tried to pretend nothing happened. Like we could all just pick up where we left off. She said she sat down at the kitchen table after and cried for 10 minutes straight. Not for her, my wife. For me. For the version of her son who'd stopped calling as much in those last few months, whose voice had gone flat on the phone. For the hurt I'd carried without saying a word. Then came my sister. Apparently, she showed up at her house unannounced. Drove up the long gravel driveway, parked crooked near the rosebush, and just sat there for a while before getting out. My niece saw her from the upstairs window, said she stood on the porch like she didn't know whether to knock or run. Eventually, she knocked. Quiet at first. Then harder. When no one answered, she sat down on the top step and cried. My sister stood just inside the door, hand on the knob, not moving. She told me later she wanted to open it. Not to let her in, but to look her in the eye and say, you don't get to cry here. But she didn't. She just waited until the crying stopped, until the sound of her car tires faded back down the gravel. And through all this, every call, every message, every ignored knock, she still didn't understand. That was the part that haunted me. That was what stuck in my chest like a shard of glass I couldn't dig out. She had no idea what she'd done. She treated it like a misstep, like she'd tripped over a curb and expected me to offer a hand. As if betrayal were something that could be brushed off, followed by a sit-down talk over coffee where she'd promised to do better. It never occurred to her that what she broke couldn't be put back. That some things, once shattered, don't make sound when they fall, they just disappear. And maybe that's what got me the most. Not the act itself, not even the lies that followed, but the casual way she carried her guilt. Like it was a thing we could schedule a conversation about. Like it deserved a second chance. There was no apology that could reach me by then. No explanation she could offer that I hadn't already burned through in my head 100 times. I didn't need her words. I didn't need her tears. I'd already lived in the silence she gave me. The cold shoulder. The brushed-off conversations. The phone turned over, face down on the nightstand. That silence had been my companion for months, long before I ever walked out. Now it was her turn to hear it. Let her call. Let her show up. Let her stand out in the rain like she was the only one left hurting. Because here's the truth she never understood. The real pain didn't come from losing her. It came from realizing she lost me long before I left. And she never even noticed. I always figured she'd find me eventually. Wasn't like I joined the witness protection program or moved across the country. I didn't change my name or start growing a beard. I just pulled myself out of the places we used to share. A quiet subtraction. But when you file for divorce, some things end up in public record. Addresses, case numbers, signatures. All she had to do was look in the right places. She showed up on a Thursday. I had just gotten back from the laundromat, arms full of warm clothes still smelling faintly of detergent and dryer sheets. There were 2 bags of groceries in the back seat, and I remember I was thinking about whether I had bought the wrong kind of peanut butter when I turned the corner and saw her. She was sitting on the concrete steps outside the building, hair tied back. Big coat, the one she used to wear on cold grocery runs. She looked smaller somehow, less sure of herself. Her hands were wrapped around a paper cup of coffee that was already half collapsed from being gripped too tightly. When she saw me, she stood up fast like she'd been caught doing something wrong. I kept walking. Didn't pause, didn't say her name. She stepped into my path, voice cracking before she even got the first words out. Why didn't you tell me? I stopped, met her eyes. They were red, swollen. She looked like she hadn't slept. Looked like she'd been asking herself the same question all week. I didn't answer right away. Just shifted the laundry from one arm to the other and said, calm and level, tell you what. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She blinked. That you knew. I nodded once. You mean the hotel? The receipts? The man in the blazer? The room light that never went off? She swallowed hard. I saw her knees wobble just slightly. I didn't, she stammered, and for a second, I thought she might try to spin it. Turn it into confusion, a misunderstanding, a moment of weakness that didn't mean what it looked like. But she stopped herself. Maybe because of the look on my face. Maybe because she could finally tell I wasn't the same man who used to give her the benefit of the doubt. I kept my voice steady. No yelling, no bitterness. Just facts laid out plain as a weather report. I found the receipt in your purse. You said you were working late. It said otherwise. So I followed you the next time. Watched you meet him in the parking lot. Saw the way you hugged. Saw the hotel room light turn on. Saw it stay on. She covered her mouth with her hand. Not in shock, but like someone trying to stop themselves from saying the wrong thing. Her shoulders were trembling now. I thought we could talk it out, she said. Maybe fix it. Rebuild. I set the laundry down on the concrete beside me, reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the folder I'd been carrying for days. It was thin. Nothing elaborate. Just one letter, typed. My signature at the bottom. It said, in simple language, that I wanted no contact. That I wasn't coming back. That I wished her no harm, but that she no longer had a place in my life. And one photograph from that day at the motel. I handed it to her. She took it like it was made of glass. Go away, I said quietly. Don't ever show up in my life again. She didn't argue. She didn't cry harder. She just stood there, staring at the folder like she couldn't make sense of how light it was. Like she expected a novel but got a note. And then she turned and walked away. Didn't run. Didn't look back. Just walked, slow and hollow, toward whatever came next for her. I picked up my laundry, walked inside, and closed the door behind me. Locked it. Stood there for a moment with my back against the door, letting the silence settle around me again. It felt like peace. Not joy, not relief, just the clean kind of silence that follows a storm. The kind you can finally rest in. She had asked why I didn't tell her. The truth was, I did. Just not with words. I told her with absence. With the hollow space in the closet. With the blank screen when she tried to call. With a ring in a silverware drawer. With a name removed from every corner of my life. And now, with a folder. A final answer to a question she never thought she'd have to ask. 6 weeks later, I showed up to court with damp hair and boxing gloves still strapped to my wrists. It wasn't planned that way. I didn't circle the date in red or rehearse some dramatic entrance. I'd just gotten used to starting my mornings with punches instead of coffee. There was a gym down the block from my apartment, a place that smelled like leather and liniment and something honest. No pretense there. Just sweat and breath and movement. A place where every hit meant something, and you had to stay in the moment or get clocked. I finished the class, wiped my face down with a towel, and walked the 6 blocks to the courthouse. Didn't even change. Still in my gym shirt, old sneakers, hands taped under the gloves. I liked the way it felt, carrying a part of my new life with me into the last chapter of the old one. When I walked into the waiting area outside the courtroom, I saw her sitting on the bench by the double doors. She looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine ad. Hair curled. Makeup flawless. wearing those pearl earrings I'd bought her for our 5th anniversary, back when I thought we were building something permanent. She had a folder on her lap, clutched like a life raft, and her eyes were already searching the room the second she heard footsteps. She saw me, took me in, head to toe, sweat-damp collar, wrist wraps, duffel bag slung over my shoulder. I didn't stop, didn't wave, didn't even nod. Just walked right past and sat on the bench across from her, facing the window. I could feel her looking at me, waiting for something. A glance, a word, anything. I gave her nothing. The court clerk came out 15 minutes later, called our names. She stood quickly. I stood slower. We walked in side by side, but not together, like two strangers summoned to the same place by accident. The judge looked over the paperwork. He was quick, efficient, asked the required questions, confirmed we were both present and understood the terms. We both said yes. Her voice cracked on hers. Mine didn't. The whole thing took 9 minutes. 9 minutes to end a decade. And then it was done. Just like that. I stepped out of the courtroom and into the hallway, felt the weight lift, not all at once, but like a slow breath finally exhaled after being held too long. I didn't look back to see if she followed. Didn't wait to hear what she'd say if she tried. I walked straight down the marble steps and out onto the street where the cold air hit my face like a second wind. The sun was out. Bright, low, slicing through the buildings like it had something to prove. I pulled my gloves off, rolled them up, stuffed them in my bag. The city moved around me, indifferent and alive. On paper, I got the house, the dog, a few other things that used to belong to us and now belonged only to me. But the truth was, I didn't care about the stuff. Not really. What I got, what I really walked away with, was peace. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that settles in quietly after the noise dies down. No more second-guessing. No more gut-punching silences in the middle of conversations. No more trying to decipher glances or track hours or wonder who she was texting under the table. Just peace. Still. Honest. I went home that afternoon, opened the door to the house I used to share, and stood in the entryway for a moment. The walls were the same. The pictures were gone. My dog, Cooper, came barreling around the corner and nearly knocked me over, tail wagging like it had its own engine. I dropped my bag, knelt down, and let him cover my face in licks and joy. He didn't know anything about court dates or manila envelopes. He just knew I came back. That night, I sat on the back porch with a cold beer in hand and Cooper at my feet. The air was crisp, a little bite in it. You could feel fall trying to nudge summer out of the way. I liked that, seasons changing without asking anyone's permission. Just doing what they had to do. I looked out across the yard, thought about the man I used to be, thought about how far I'd come without really knowing it. You don't notice growth while it's happening. Not until you look back and realize you're not standing in the same place anymore. She thought she broke me, but what she did was free me. So I sat there a little while longer, watching the sky turn amber, letting the quiet settle in my chest. And I didn't look back. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think her confusion about what she did wrong was real, or was it just denial? If you liked the story, subscribe to the channel and give us a like.